Hello, and welcome all of you. I'm Subindu Gaurkar. I'm the project director at RISE, and I'm really pleased to have all of you today as we launch our report on weaving fairness, how women workers hold the key to climate resilience in the garment, footwear, and textile sectors. This report is a result of combination of input and discussions with workers, industry stakeholders, brands and suppliers, as well as civil society organizations. I would really like to thank our research partners, BSR, CARE, Conciliary, and CWPD from Bangladesh and Cambodia, respectively. In the next hour or so, we look forward to having fruitful discussions with you, where we will start with context setting and share some key findings from this research, followed by a panel discussion where we will hear perspectives and learnings from our panelists regarding climate adaptation and mitigation strategies, as well as some really actionable next steps. This will be followed by a Q&A session, and we really encourage all of you to share your questions in the Q&A tab, as you will see at the bottom of your screen. We have a fantastic group of speakers lined up today, and they will be joining me in the panel discussion. I will start by introducing Sinuon Hun, who is the technical advisor for advancing women and girls at CARE Cambodia. Jason Judd, who is the executive director at Global Labour Institute at Cornell University. Sheikh Suchita Jahan, who is the coordinator for Responsible Business Hub at BGMEA. Sanzida Sultana, who is the additional executive director at Karmaji Nari. But before we go to the panel discussion, I would first like to hand over to Eileen Gallagher, who's the Director of Climate at BSR, to set the scene, followed by Laura Macias, who will talk us through some of the key findings from the research, as well as share some of the experiences of the workers, as well as why a worker-centric approach is important for businesses. Over to you, Eileen.
Thank you so much, Subindu. Appreciate that. Well, it's a pleasure to be with you all today. I work with companies here at BSR to understand how climate change and solutions to climate change affect people across company value chains, from workers and suppliers to consumers and communities. And the work that we did here with RISE and our other partners is really essential to truly understand how climate change and the solutions that are proposed or implemented affects workers, particularly women, in the garment, footwear, and textile supply chain. And as Subindu just mentioned in today's discussion, you will hear firsthand accounts of how climate change is affecting workers. But let me just say a few words on why understanding this and addressing it is a business imperative. First, when we talk about acting on climate change, we are talking about climate mitigation, which is decarbonization, moving away from fossil fuels to avoid harmful greenhouse gases, and climate adaptation, so adapting to the climate impacts we unfortunately are experiencing today and will in the future due to decades of inaction. So any climate plan needs to include both a focus on mitigation and adaptation. Next slide, please. Now, unfortunately, to date, many climate plans fail to take account of people. And this can lead to unfulfilled targets, pushback and strained relationships, passing down of financial burden, or even adverse health impacts on workers, and other unintended consequences. Now, to properly inform effective and impactful climate plans, we need to understand how people across our value chains may be more vulnerable to climate change than others. Those who are experiencing existing hardships, inequities, and inequalities will be disproportionately affected by climate change. And this certainly includes women and women workers. In many manufacturing supply chains, and especially in garment, footwear, and textile, women workers are the backbone of the industry. Women workers are already reporting feeling the impacts of climate change, and this could include illness from heat stress, vector-borne disease arising from heat and flooding and inundation, or impacts from other extreme weather events. And workers feel the impact from and are concerned about decarbonization efforts. So low carbon and circularity approaches can offer decent jobs, but the increased capital expenses for factories cannot come at the expense of worker wages. Women are also at risk of being left behind. Upskilling initiatives for new tech, circular production processes, and energy systems cannot be prioritized solely for male workers, for instance. Women workers already face low wages, poor working conditions, limited career growth in some instances, and persistent workplace violence and harassment. And climate change can worsen these challenges. When workers struggle, productivity drops, production and shipping delays increase, worker health and well-being suffers, absenteeism rises. With infrastructure damage may come worsening working conditions. With flooding in the community, workers can't get to the factory, and the flow of goods and other services can come to a halt. All of this has an impact on business. Yes, at the factory level, but certainly can flow upwards and affect buyers. We are also seeing increasing scrutiny on management and disclosure of such issues. Now, yes, the regulatory environment around the world continues to evolve in terms of sustainability and climate frameworks and disclosure, but we know companies are increasingly required to disclose what are their climate risks, both the risks associated with transitioning to a greener economy and the risks associated with a warming planet. What we're now seeing is increased focus on how the companies will address the climate risks that affect people in their value chains. And I imagine we will, and we already are in some cases, are seeing increased investor scrutiny on this as well. So to address these issues, businesses can ensure that women workers are active participants in climate action, helping to design and implement climate solutions that actually work. And by addressing these challenges through collaboration and partnership, climate action can protect the workforce while also strengthening the resilience of the business. Encouragingly, we find that climate mitigation and adaptation measures can protect profit and future jobs, so long as they are done in a process and outcome that is inclusive and really prioritizing people that are critical for business success. I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eileen. Hi, everyone. Very thrilled to see you all here. I'm going to be presenting to you then some of the findings from our research and from what Eileen was just discussing in terms of the impacts on workers. I would like to start then this presentation by telling you the story of a woman worker we spoke to in Bangladesh during the research. I will give you a few seconds to read the quote. What you can see in the quote is just a part of the story. During the rainy season the night before, she had to stay awake because she had to place all her family belongings on top of their bed because the house was fully flooded. Without enough sleep, she had to go to work next day. She walked from the home to the factory, and her clothes got very dirty in the commute. When she arrived to the factory, she couldn't find soap to clean her legs and feet, nor she will have the time to do it because of production pressure. You could see how intense the infection in her leg was that she ended up in surgery. She went to the public hospital first, but there was no availability, so she ended up in a private hospital where she had to spend money. And then afterwards, she was not granted sick leave by the factory manager. Likely, she might have been also subject of violence and harassment, as she couldn't be as productive as when she was 100% healthy. This story illustrates very clearly the direct impacts and cascading consequences of climate hazards that affect the lives of workers. So today, if we move to the next slide, I'm going to present to you some other stories on how workers are experiencing climate change in factories in Bangladesh and in Cambodia. These findings come from a co-creation process we did with workers and industry stakeholders in these two countries and globally. And for more information on the methodology, you can refer to our report, which is in the chat. So let's jump into the details of the findings. Workers are already feeling the effects of climate change. So if we move to the next slide, please. This is not something of the future, it's the present, with more frequent floods, heavy rainfall, and extreme weather disrupting their daily life in two of the countries, Bangladesh and Cambodia. And awareness about the concept itself of climate change varies, but environmental changes are clear. Most of the workers told us that they are noticing hotter temperatures and heavier rains than before. But if we move to the next slide, which are exactly the climate hazards, and Eileen was mentioning some of those through her presentation, that workers are experiencing and how they're impacting their lives. So we created this graph to better illustrate how climate impacts are affecting the life of workers. The first section that you see here at the left is a climate hazard, and I'm going to read to you literally what that means. Is a climate condition with the potential to harm a natural system or a society. In this case, the society is the community of workers, of factory workers. So this includes the direct climate impacts, like changes in temperature, so heat waves, which are of course very common and something that the industry is more and more putting attention, but it's also about cold waves, it's about heavy rainfall, it's about air pollution, and all the others you see in the list here at the left. So these climate hazards have some direct impacts on our population, which is the community of workers. These are the initial consequences on workers' experiences and in their lives, and this includes the direct impacts on health and mental health, so physical and mental health, migration from rural areas to urban areas, and damages to infrastructure, including public infrastructure, but also workers' assets as housing. And then these direct impacts have some cascading consequences. The cascading consequences are the systemic risk and vulnerabilities across workers' experiences resulting from climate change, which are especially critical to women workers because of historic inequalities and social and cultural norms. So these include spikes in cases of gender-based violence and harassment, for example, when there's a climate hazards. It includes also the rise of unpaid care work and domestic responsibilities, a worsening of their sexual and reproductive health, and of course, a threat to workers' livelihoods. So this is the theory. Then how this looks in practice? What did workers tell us? If we move to the next slide. So it looks like increased incidence of severe physical health issues, such as fainting, dizziness, waterborne diseases. These are driven by climate hazards, but are worsened by poor working conditions. Workers in vulnerable situations like pregnant women are particularly at risk. It also looks as growing threat to mental health, and you can see here some of the quotes, with rising stress and anxiety levels, particularly among women workers. We also found that women, can you please stay on the other slide? We also found that women face greater health risk because of cultural norms. For example, in Bangladesh, they wear long layers of clothes because of traditional beliefs. In Cambodia, it's the same case, but they use it because of sun protection, which is mostly associated to beauty standards, putting them more at risk of heat stress. In relation to their sexual and reproductive health, we found that dehydration that is caused by the limited access to water in factories led women to urinary infections, and they also have very poor access to menstrual product. And during heat waves, for example, they are more at risk of allergies during their periods. In the next slide, we will see loss of livelihoods, which is one of the most concerning cascading consequences of climate change. Damages in workers' housing is causing lots of assets and higher unexpected expenses. In some cases, workers reported an increase in food due to climate change impacts because this is damaging crops and creating issues with transportation. The damages in infrastructure and the deterioration of their health creates more absenteeism and cause them to be less productive in the factory floor. And of course, this has a direct impact on their wages and monthly income. And lastly, the unequal distribution of unpaid care and domestic work, if we move to the next slide, is exacerbated by the climate crisis. Women reported doing even more of this work when they already do a lot of it. During floods, for example, or during heat waves, where food spoils faster, they have no access to fridges, so they have to cook more often. They're also the primary caregivers of children and family members, falling sick more often because of the climate change impacts. And all of this is creating an increasing stress, fatigue, and loss of livelihoods, because in many cases they have to miss work because they have to care for others. Some studies have also shown the link between the increase of gender-based violence and harassment, both at work and at home, during a climate event, and we found a similar trend in this study. Women reported increased cases of violence from supervisors because climate hazards create production disruptions and stress. Increasing domestic violence linked to the economic hardship of climate hazards was also reported by women. So if we move to the next slide, we use all of these findings coming from the voice of workers and industry stakeholders to co-create a set of interventions with workers and stakeholders in a workshop in Dhaka. And these interventions, we have categorized them in these 3 buckets that you see here. The first one is related to improving factory environments to support workers in a changing climate. So this includes, for example, tracking temperature and gender health impacts or adequating infrastructure in factories in direct consultation with workers, especially women workers. The second one is about reimagining factory schedules, operations, and policies to manage climate disruptions. For example, including impacts of climate change in audits and having clear safety protocols in place to protect workers during a climate hazard, which could be a heat wave, but it could be other climate hazards, as we have discussed today. And lastly, but not least, it's about reinforcing and sustaining well-being and social protection systems to help workers navigate some of these climate risks. So climate resilience in the sector means going beyond compliance to safeguard workers' well-being physically, mentally, and financially. For example, here we can focus on expanding workers' safety nets to support them during the climate shocks through financial products as insurance, for example. So all of these measures need to be done in consultation and in collaboration with workers, especially women workers. And our panelists today are going to be discussing some of these strategies and how to involve workers in the process. So I'm happy to hand it over back to you, Subindu. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura. I would like to start by inviting Sinuan first. Sinuan, care has been part of this research, but you've also done additional research on climate. I would like to hear from you, out of all these climate impacts, which one did you find the most striking? And also, do you think there are additional climate challenges that women workers face, particularly in Cambodia?
Yeah, thank you, Subindu. Thank you so much. I think just would like to highlight some of the, the climate impact on women workers, particularly in the Cambodia. So we also have our research conducting in Cambodia for 12 factories. So we have roughly sample size is around 400 to 500 workers. So we observe that the climate impact of the climate change are really intersecting factors, like it contributes to the lowest socioeconomic status among women migrants, and also women have limited decisions making power in relation in the process of the designs of climate adaptations, or policy and some of the resources that they should be assessed to cope or adapt with the climate impact. And because of the gender norm, I think it's quite similar to what Laura have shared for the right research. It's quite similar, like that put a lot of burden on women in terms of how she can coping with the climate's impact for her own and within the family and also with the workplace. For example, I think the women also disclose how she used the climate coping strategy in terms of during heat, like in summer. No, in Cambodia we don't have summer, but we have dry season. But in other countries they have summer, so they have to wear very long clothes in order to like protect from heat and to avoid the harassment as well. Like in our culture, when you dress slightly or very short, so it can be exposed to harassment. So it really put her like at risk of health-related issues in terms of faintings or like overhydrated. And we also receiving some of the reports that worker put a lot of concern of risk of fainting, and that have been flagged by the worker as well. So in terms of the unpaid care work and domestic work, like exactly the same what Laura had mentioned, that women have to put a lot of efforts and with the existing burden. And when the climate's impact is coming, either like floodings or heat, so she have to bear with all the burdens of unpaid care work and family member. Yeah, and I think the additional issue that I would like to highlight here a little bit are the lack of access to the gender sensitivity workplace policy. For example, in factory, not really have ready of the adaptation to the climate's impact. They have a like very regular operation inside the factory without climate change and gender sensitivities are really updated to the emerging issue. So I think, especially, for example, they not really have a flexible working hour. I heard some factory, very minor factory, have disclosed that they have allowed worker to have, like working flexible, like you coming late or you leave early, something like that, or avoid very high temperature days, or and install some cooling system to minimize the heat stress that could be the impact of women health and for the productivity like reduction as well. So I think it's quite really important that to concentrate of how all the key stakeholders to focus on like putting the climate and gender responsive and make it reality. Thank you, and over.
Thank you, Simone. And if I can invite you, Jason, now, you've also been doing some research on climate over the last few years in the sector. How do the findings that Laura shared resonate with your experience? And I would also like to, get your thoughts on there is lack of integration between, the social and the environmental interventions in the sector. How do you think this can be addressed?
Okay, thanks. Well, I thought in the report what resonated with me chiefly was this, that workers know through experience and conversations and reporting that heat is getting higher, that floods are more intense, and that they're harmful. Just too hot, heat in particular, but too hot it's intuitive. You know it when it's too hot, and then it shows up in the way that your body is behaving. And workers clearly see the costs of this: higher electric bills, higher medical costs, lost days at work, lower productivity pay. And then finally, the solutions are pretty straightforward. Not necessarily simple, but straightforward: cooler working places, cooler homes, higher wages, and listening to and dealing with workers on these effects of climate breakdown. So that was my initial reaction. On this problem of integration, I guess there are two problems. One is, yes, that labor social issues and environment issues are divided. Governments often run these out of different agencies, sometimes different ministries. Brands and retailers push them together in sustainability teams, but they're divorced often from sourcing decisions. Here's an example, and then the way they're tracked is often separate. Here's an example from Vietnam, where most brands and retailers are doing some of their buying. The ILO's Better Work program, in fact, most auditors, they can't tell you what the temperature is in the ironing or washing section at say 3 p.m. in the middle of April or May. Now that should be a function of a labor audit, but generally it's not. And in Vietnam, the government sanctions a third party to conduct environmental audits. They measure temperature, but they do it at 1 hour, 1 day in a year, and a factory gets a check mark. It's compliant with the temperature standard if at 8 a.m. On a December morning, arguably the coolest hour of the year, the temperature doesn't exceed the legal threshold, which in Vietnam for industrial work of this kind is 32 Celsius. So that's sort of a nonsense from a governance perspective. And the people with authority here, the Vietnamese government, the employers themselves, the brands and retailers buying from these factories are part of this. They have authority, they have responsibility here, but they're sort of winking and nodding at one another. So that's one problem of integration. And the other was mentioned by Eileen. It's the need to integrate the mitigation or the decarbonization approach with the adaptation. If we treat these separately, employers, suppliers will react. So these two need to be integrated along with the labor and environment issues. How do you do it? Well, we can sort of push these together on paper or under law, but what will really make the difference is some form of legal liability. When the brands, the employers feel that there is a legal jeopardy if they fail to address these issues, then we'll get some action. That's what's promised under the original EU due diligence directive.
Thank you so much. And now can I invite you, Sneha? The research showed that climate change is exacerbating the already existing long-standing issues that we have at the factory level, whether it is, limited access to clean water or poor ventilation. How do you think that the industry could come together and collaborate in such a way that it can improve, factory conditions, and so that the factories are better prepared for the future, as climate situation worsens?
Yeah, thank you. The climate change is real now, and a lot of things have already come up. And thanks to also Jason that he has mentioned the EU due diligence directive, where there's an integration between the human rights and the environmental due diligence issues. So, there are water levels are going down, and the temperature levels are going up. These are the real issues, and these are definitely, they have impacts on the workers. And to your question, well, the solutions have to be, in a collaborative way of the management, the workers, the policymakers, and of course the buyers. Throughout the supply chain, there has to be shared responsibility that we always say. So, well, of course, the immediate actions can be, to invest in water efficient technologies, improve ventilation and heat resilient infrastructures. I think during when I responded to the research, I think I have had shared some of the case studies as well when I have visited in many factories, like how the heat resilience is, is not so much now. So, and for the long-term strategies, there has to be transition to renewable energy. It could be solar, rooftop solar, and there are some other things that are coming up as renewable energy, of course. And as you know that the industry is also adopting with the circular resource management and all of that. So, of course, the workers' perspective, they are essential. They know best what interventions improve their well-being and productivity. But of course, from the management perspective, also it needs to be there. And again, it needs to be throughout the supply chain. There needs to be shared responsibility. But at the end of the day, the collaboration is the key to all, because, development partners, the CSOs, they all they play a very crucial part in all of it. So and they can have their technical expertise and innovation that they suggest. For example, this research itself, it has its own suggestions. And of course, from the buyer's part, there's fair pricing, fair purchasing practices, and shared responsibility gain. And of course, the government also needs to, enable some policy frameworks to it. For example, if EU due diligence directive is enacted, perhaps even at national levels, we need to, have our own policies and regulations as well, aligned with those. And from BGMA's perspective, what we can say is that of course, we can convene, coordinate, and ensure that no factory, whether they're big or small, is left behind all of these initiatives. Because some of the things that I have just seen from your research, it's interesting also, because when we are sharing the best practices, there are these sort of situations also that are taking place. So yes, of course, we are here to, support all of the factories, because sometimes we just see the impact, but what is causing it, we sometimes, miss out on that as well. So, of course, this needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Thanks, Neha. Sanzida, if I can invite you now, as someone from a women's rights organization, how do you think women's organizations and businesses can partner in a more meaningful way, when we design and implement some climate strategies? And more importantly, how can we ensure that workers, particularly women workers, participate and contribute to these discussions and solutions?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you all the panelists. The question is very relevant, what the earlier panelist Sneha said also. But at present, if we see in Bangladesh, no such example I can tell you that women rights organizations or worker rights organizations or worker are invited or involved in any planning, designing, or implementing process regarding the climate related strategies taken by our BGMA, BKMA, or the leather sector also. I though we discuss in many ways during the recent discussions going on, especially on the corporate sustainability due diligence directive or the OECD guideline, and later on the human rights and environmental due diligence. These discussions are going on in our country, and also we are talking more the worker-centric approach or effective stakeholders engagement. But we cannot see an initiative yet, or we are not, as a Korpojibi Nari representative, we are not invited yet. But I think, I feel the involvement and engagement and relationship should be there in a collaborative and multifaceted approach. Uh, and in other discussions also, we discuss that we can establish a platform or any sort of forum where the workers, worker rights organizations, the employers, and the government and research organizations can sit together to discuss what to do the coming new threats of our business as well as the climate change. Um, and again, when I see the business partners are doing many initiatives, if we go to the BGMA website, we can see many initiatives for the sustainability issue regarding the climate change and other issue. So through this platform or forum, there may be a good discussion regarding the upcoming plan, policies, initiatives, what are taking for the adaptation and mitigation related strategies. As well as if any factory or any initiative is planned for the community people who are affected. We learned that from the heavy rainfall or heat stresses. And also we are see that in the factories already to face the reduce the carbon emission and other issues, new initiatives are coming. That Sneha told also, the renewable energy or efficiency, energy efficiency, new technologies. So in this process also we should involve the workers, and the workers, we can ask the workers which will be fit for them, which will be the good for them for a long time. I can tell another point that there are few, we can see the negative impact that relocation of factory or shifting the duties or the job cut. These information are there, and in this process the women workers are very affected and they are losing their jobs. So I think the if any factory or any employer plans to do this, it can be a long-term plan, and the workers can inform earlier, and there should be a plan the how they are doing this, and how worker can plan for their future with few supports. And again, I can tell that there are circular economy discussion is going on, and BGME is taking last few years many circular economy related initiatives. So I think in this process, the circular economy, we know the reduced recycling process, and we can establish new a business also, where these the workers who are losing their jobs or affecting their jobs, they can involve in these new factories, new initiatives by upskilling or reskilling. Uh, all these initiatives, I think, can help the our future generation of workers to because most of the I when I discuss with our workers, they are not interested to do more, or they are not interested to that their future generation will involve in these type of what I can say, not worker friendly environment. So with these initiatives, I can tell that the workers will also involve the process, and they can get their decision what is good for them or what is good for their environment also. Lastly, I should say that there should be some contribution. There should be some government initiative also, but the contribution for the corporate partners, the corporations, and the employers to establish a pool funding to create sustainable social protection mechanism in our country, because our government is not so much a big budget for this. So we can pool fund for some fund in for future to reduce price, baby crash, maternity benefit, housing, rationing, etc. So I can stop
Yeah,
here
thank
and
you.
can, yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Sanzeda. If I can come back to you, Jason, I understand a lot of your focus has been on heat stress, and it has also been identified as a critical risk in the industry. Where do you think is the urgent need or, investment that the industry should be focusing on, which can have the greatest impact? What could some of these practical solutions look like?
Yeah, on heat specifically, the two countries in the study here, Bangladesh and Cambodia, have have famously vague workplace heat standards. I mean, that's obviously by design. They've had years to come up with a standard. Their competitors in the region have clear standards. Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, even Pakistan. So that's a problem. And most brands have nothing specific to say in their codes about extreme heat. That's changing now, but slowly. The exceptions have been Levi's, VF, Nike, H&M is at work on guidance. So this is changing, but awfully slowly. And the MSIs that they build and work through, like the Accord, the RSC in Bangladesh, Better Work, FLA, SLCP, none of them have serious heat standards, not yet. So on heat specifically, brands and retailers need to set workplace ranges. They should not wait on the ILO. They should not point to vague or non-existent national standards, as in Cambodia or Bangladesh, or in places like Vietnam, where the standard is clear, but the enforcement is, a sort of farce. And the brands and retailers can set standards in the same way that they do for other dangers, hazardous chemicals, excessive noise, emergency exits, and then they can measure them in the way they measure traditional labor issues like wage payments and hours, checking daily. So that's an example of how you integrate the climate and the work measures. And they could start by adopting, brands and retailers and their manufacturers could begin by adopting, at least provisionally, the standard in Vietnam, which is very clear, has a clear standard, 32 Celsius, and protocols for extreme heat. And they could start measuring against that standard tomorrow. The tech is incredibly inexpensive and easily available. Trade unions in both countries, in Cambodia and Bangladesh, have called for this, and they've also flagged up the other issues that will help workers and their families deal with extreme heat or climate breakdown. The first one is living wages. There's arguably no more adaptive climate tech from the worker and the family perspective than living wages. The ability to afford apartments that keep you away from dangerously flooded neighborhoods, or pay an electricity bill in the hottest months, or pay for medical care. Those are really functions of wages. The other two are the right to organize and bargain, and social protection systems. These are notoriously weak in Bangladesh, but also in other places where brands and retailers are buying a lot of product. So that's the first thing. Just set a standard, and then you can measure against it, and you can see what the relationship is between extreme heat and high humidity in the workplace and efficiency. And you run those numbers. You can see the scale of the investment required to meet the standard. You can calculate the return on investment, and then things start moving. But as long as we're in this sort of vague, temperature should be, quote, comfortable or tolerable, as long as that's the national standard, and until organizations like the BGMEA get behind actual standards and get behind living wages for workers and a reasonable wage setting mechanism, as they have in Cambodia but lack in Bangladesh, I don't think there will be much progress.
Thank you so much. I still do have a few questions for the rest of the panelists, but I'm conscious of time. So maybe if we can try and keep ourselves really brief, and we can try and run through these questions. So Sinwon, coming back to you, I understand that you also identified some policy level changes. Maybe you could share that very briefly and top line with us in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So I think just add to what are the most impactful policy level change that we identify for the study that we have. Actually, we have the subtopic on women migrant that we focus on how they can access to the social protection. They have we call a national social protection fund. So we also identify that most of workers can access to the services, but they indicate that some of like women, or especially migrant women who are migrate from one district or one province to another province, that still lacks of the information available, like what are the basic criteria to access to the service, or what are the services available that they can access to. So I think there is also a lack of transparent information or up-to-date information, because of the policy are really quite good, but keep evolving. Sometimes it's very sudden, so you have like to up to date what is the most criteria changes. So the factory who are very good proactively catch up that, so they can inform worker well. But for other factory, mostly mediums and small size or subcontract factory, they're not really good ahead of that one. So most of the worker are not really lacks of information available. So in terms of the gender, particularly centric for the climate change, actually Cambodia, they have very good master plan for gender and climate change, the ensuring that mainstreaming adaptation to address the disaster risk reduction and mitigation investment for all the sector, not only the garment factory sector. But the observation of the implementation are still, like limited in terms of how the policy are in the implementation, like put, like gender in the centers of the climate change, reflect to the different needs of people, like not only women, but others, intersectionality, like people with disability also work in the garment factory worker as well, like how they really voice their needs and concern in that one. So we see the limitations, and particularly for the national social protection, are not really, even they have a very good big policy at the national level, but it's not really quite clear structures and how translate that policy into action and investments. It is very important because of lack of resource. Also, the government admit that they have, like national budget allocation, and relying so much on international donors, like, development agency like UNs and other private donors, for example, that contribute to implement that policy. So they cannot doing that at such big policy levels alone. So I think it really crucial that all the key stakeholder, like not only the supplier themselves, but with support from brand. So what I mean by brand, they should support in terms of investment. So you should focus on the investment of technical support, like Jason had already mentioned. For example, how to drive the workplace standard for heat, measures and mitigation plans, and put that climate change standard at the factory level, and also along with the financial investment as well. Because what we learned from the supplier country in Cambodia and some other country as well, that have disclosed a lot of burden on them because of the, for the supply chain practices, like the ecosystem, the price is in front of them. So because of the business and the investment are really profit-based. So if you keep that traditional purchasing practice and not really consider how much the investment should be from brands, and also how much the supplier should be invest their own resource and budgeting in ensuring that all the policy are really well implemented and make it reality. That not just the policy, but when the realities is worker at the who are really impacted by those decisions and investment. So I think I would encourage to, all of us here in the room as well, like how we should consider, focus on the, for example, if factory can, with the support from the brands as well, and retailer as well, like how might you support them in terms of trackings of the gender deaggregated data, because of we need to identify how many women or people with disability and other intersectionality who are in your workforce, and what are their needs, and what are the pros of climate hazard or impact. So what are the, the voice of them need to be consulted, like have to be asked. Otherwise it's still, process and not really meaningful engaging workers at the centers of the decision and investment. So I think that's all for me. Over.
Thank you. I'm very conscious of time, so yeah, and I think I would have wanted to discuss a bit more around the role of the governments and maybe on social protection, and probably listening to you guys for some clear, actionable next steps. But I see a lot of questions already coming in, so I don't know, maybe I will hand it back to you, Laura, in the interest of time, to start looking at the questions that have come in and try and, taking these forward.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks everyone for all your interesting questions. I hope I have done a good job in trying to bucket all of them. So the first question is to you, Sneha, around the business case of this. Why factories should care about this? Why factories should be investing in a climate resilience strategy with a people-centered approach? What do you think is the business case behind this for factories?
Well, of course, that's a crucial question. Like, why should they do it? But I would like to ask that why shouldn't they do it? Because when it comes to business, it's a entire ecosystem, and it's not about like it's people, planet, and of course money as well. So I think everything is interrelated, and interdependency is of course there, and this has a very direct connection. I can tell you why it's economic, because when a worker is directly impacted by climate or any such thing, it's very evident that the presentation itself showed that how it impacts their efficiency, because their health is impacted and everything. And when it comes to efficiency and productivity, of course, my business is going to be hampered. So there's a very absolutely proportionate relationship to it, and there's nothing to not see it. It's I wish I had more time, so I'll just keep it very brief. So yeah, it's directly proportional.
Awesome, wonderful, thanks for that. So definitely there's a business case behind this, but it's not only on factories, right? And there's a question around what's the role of international buyers in all this process and in all this strategy. So Eileen, I would like to ask you that question. What should be the role of brands and international buyers in what we're proposing today and what you hear today from panelists?
Yeah, so there's certainly a role for all actors across the supply chain, and successful delivery of these solutions requires long-term investment and collaboration and financing. But buyers certainly do have a role to play. Their climate plans and their goals, or the process of even creating them, and then the outcome ought to be inclusive. We've heard that from several of the panelists, developed in ways that include voices and the needs of whom it will affect, so workers. The climate plans also need to include societal elements and implications, so not just climate in a vacuum or in silos. So, for example, considering issues of affordability and accessibility when we think about transitioning to renewables, or ensuring policies and procedures or factory audits also consider the fuller picture of working conditions and how people are affected by heat, flooding, climate-related illnesses. Exploring deeper issues that can be exacerbated by climate change. So certainly issues around wages, and Jason certainly mentioned living wage. And of course, some more of the technical support, so knowledge and capacity building to help factories develop their climate plans, but also ensure that they're aligned with buyers' plans and goals. So there's multiple responsibilities for buyers, but again, it does take collaboration and shared responsibility, as I've heard mentioned as well.
Thank you so much for that, Eileen. And Jason, maybe this one is for you. So you spoke a lot about standards and the importance of standards and the importance of right measurement, taking into account the season, as part of this, and the roles that workers are doing in the factory. So how you couple these technical solutions and standards with the voices of workers, how workers can participate in this process to ensure that this is in place in factories?
Was at factory level, it's bargaining, but there's so little of that. I mean, there's so little substantive bargaining in Cambodia and even less in Bangladesh. So there's a long-standing structural problem. I mean, it's structural, it's legal, it's political. At the national level, both governments need yesterday workplace heat standards, and their unions, legitimate unions, bona fide worker-focused unions should be part of the policy process, setting that standard. And brands and retailers, for their part, need to, as I said earlier, pick a number, set a standard, and begin to measure against it. Then we can all figure out what the cost is of cooling workplaces. And then the machinery, that whether it's public policy or private regulation, the system built over the last 30 years by brands and retailers, starts to work. It should be producing good outcomes for workers, but as yet, not happening.
Okay, thanks for that. And we're almost on time. So I have another question, and this one is probably for you, Sinon. So I will ask you if you can answer this in 30 seconds. And it's a very interesting question. So why are we focusing on women workers if this is affecting all workers, both men and women workers? Climate change is impacting both populations.
Yeah. Thank you, Laura. Thank you for the one who asked this question as well. Actually, climate impact are not really, that you are correct, not really impact only for women. But why we focus on women? I'll give you some context in Cambodia. So most of the worker in the garment factory, so majorities of them are women. I think 80% are women participates in the garment factory work in Cambodia. So most of majorities of worker, either they are work in smaller factories, medium or large factories. So they are really, in majorities of the workforce. And what we study, we also focus on the male, like, between male and female, like women and men. So men also have different reactions or have a climate change impact in terms of either their coping in terms of health issue, they are also affected quite the same, but it's very specific health issue. For example, male tend to, they drink alcohol, for example, or energy drink to cope with the climates or heat. But women not drink alcohol, but she might be trying to eat some of fermented food or keep some of food for her family member. So some of the coping to the climate change are really impact differently because depend on biologicals or social norms that really influence both like sex, like female and male. So I hope I answered to that question.
Thank you so much for that, Sinon. And on these 3 minutes, so Sunsida, I will also ask you 30 seconds. In this intersectionality question, there's also something around home workers. So, of course, the report is focusing on factory workers, but there's a question around how to look deeper in the supply chain and how to address the climate impacts of workers deeper in the supply chain.
Yeah, I am just thinking that I just want to add one point with Sinon that women in our country, women are not only the working on the factory, but they have many responsibility in their home. So the women worker are burdened double or triple burdened. So we have to give them the opportunity to face them. That's why we prioritize women. And I'm thinking that we are telling about the factories, but if I see the whole value chain of the red garment factory and textile, there are a huge number of backward linkages and the subcontracting factories, home-based contractual workers, and many things. We have recently done a project with these workers, and we saw that in many ways the factories are trying to informalize the whole process, and the formal sector workers are now working as a contractual worker in a small factories. So, and most of our discussions are not highlighting these issues or these workers. We cannot know. You can imagine that in a one place with a small room, about 40-50 people with one toilet, how it looks like. And during the hot season, they are sitting in a tin shed hall. You can imagine it is not a building, something like that, with maybe no ventilation. So we should also look after these workers also.
Yes.
Subcontracting, contractual, home-based, piece rate. There are many issues are there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sunsida, and right on time. So thanks everyone for your time today. We're going to be sharing the recording. We're going to share again the link to the report. Thanks to our fantastic group of panelists, and we're open to continue the discussion. So please do reach out to all of us in case you have any other questions or in case you have any proposal for collaboration. We're really looking forward to continue the discussion on this. Again, thank you so much to all of you, our panelists. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.